Welcome to ATP Customs. Well, I told you guys the oldest running airplane in Canada is coming in, and it is here. My friend Jeff, who owns the panel truck that had we did the feature earlier with the clown truck, this is his airplane. It is a 1930 Fleet Model 2 that has less than 100 hours of flying time since its 5-year ground-up restoration. It has a Kinner 160 horsepower, 5-cylinder radial engine. Originally had a 100 horsepower Kinner engine. It was built in Buffalo, April 17th, 1930, and it is number 277 of 420 made. It was built as a training airplane to meet the public's excitement about flying after Lindbergh's flight to Paris in 1927, and it spent most of its life in Texas and California. Cruises around 95 miles an hour at 1600 RPM. It burns 9 US gallons per hour, and the project was trailered from Wisconsin in 2012, and rides can be arranged. And we're going to wander around this thing with Jeff, and he's going to point out things, because I definitely don't know anything about airplanes, but I see them going by my shop all the time. And this is about the coolest one I've ever seen. So let's wander around.
All right.
Now, did you say this was 560 cubic inches?
Yes, 560 cubic inches. And most radial engines at that period had a very low compression ratio. This is basically 5.5 to 1. And as a result, it because of the high torque, it can turn a 40-pound, 8-foot wide propeller at 1600 RPM, and believe me, that gives you all the lift you need.
So what kind of fuel do you run in this thing?
This is standard aviation fuel, though it actually has, aviation fuel has a fairly high lead content, so sometimes I put marine gas in, which has almost no lead, and just to balance it out a bit, but it actually likes the lead for the valve train.
Okay. It looks beautiful. Let's talk about the prop, because that prop is just amazing.
This propeller is made by Sense in Each. It's a factory located in Florida, and they're the only people that are certified to build propellers for this engine. And when you order one, it takes about 3 months, I think, and then they build it, custom one-off, and all the brass leading edges and the tips you see are all hand formed and hand fixed. It's yellow birch and put together with what's called resorcinol glue, like they did in the 30s and 40s, and it's actually a thing of beauty.
It is absolutely amazing. Let's talk about the wings you were telling me about.
The wings have wooden struts, which was actually still used today on a lot of home-built and experimental aircraft, and it has a truss 5-piece ribs that are hand riveted together. The wings have all new Sitka spruce spars and all new ribs, and the ribs are painstakingly made on a jig and riveted together and then assembled on the spars.
And they're made of fabric. You were telling me about the fabric.
The entire airplane is covered in fabric. It's called, the commercial name is called Seconite, and it's a derivative of Dacron, though it has what's called a square weave, because once it's loosely attached to the structure, you use a domestic iron at 250 degrees, and it shrinks square, meaning it shrinks length and width at the same time. And then you shrink it at 350, and it goes tight as a drum. Once you fasten it with a special adhesive to the structure.
And you were telling me about these Pitot tubes, but it's so much information to remember, and I'm not familiar with airplanes. I'm not sure how familiar our fans are on the channel are with them, so let's go over the Pitot tube system.
The tube at the bottom is a Pitot, and that actually accepts the air. Now it goes through that tube, and it goes down the strut and across the wing through a tube and up into the speedometer, or airspeed they call it in an aircraft. And with the air pressure in that tube, the airspeed is calibrated to basically give you within 10% of what your airspeed actually is. And that today is used on all aircraft. This pitot-static tube, as they call it, is an exact reproduction of the 1930 Fleet Pitot tube.
Wow. And what's this little piece here?
That is called a Venturi. It's a 1932, which I was able to locate. Before there was a specific electrical system in most airplanes, they used a lot of air to operate the instruments, and this actually creates a vacuum, which turns a very small wheel inside an instrument, and that allows you to look down and see if your wings are level and if you're in a turn or a bank, and it's basically runs a turn and bank instrument. They're pretty much no longer used, as everything is now electrical powered, but it's still vintage, and the instrument still works.
Wow, let's get a peek at this engine close up.
I went with it when I had the engine rebuilt. I went with the option that Kinner had in 1930, where you could fancy up the engine, I guess for the lack of a better word, and the valve covers and the intake tubes are all nickel plated.
Oh,
in 1930 they didn't have chrome plating, so everything was nickel. So that's exactly the way it was in 1930 with the nickel plating. I've just taken off the covers. You see some of the numbers on there. Because they're solid lifters, and car guys would know all about that, every 50 hours you have to basically get out your feeler gauges and do your intake and exhaust, 1/8 thou for intake and 1/12 thou for exhaust, and just to make sure your valve train is running properly.
Wow, that's unbelievable. What color is this? The red, I mean.
The red is Tennessee red, and the wings are Diana cream. And that is pretty, and the chevron on the side, of course, is black, and that is basically a duplication of the way it came out of the factory. The other color was blue with yellow wings, and I think you had very few options.
Look at that. Leather.
Yeah, that's a seal. Those hinges are all original Navy brass hinges, and some of them are duplicates. There's a fellow in the States that reproduces them exactly with a specific type of brass, and because it leaves a bit of a gap in the fabric, Fleet used these leather, little decorative, but they're actually functional in closing that gap where the hinge actually goes through.
Okay. Consolidated Aircraft Corporation.
Consolidated was the parent company of Fleet. Reuben Fleet started the company in about 1925, and then he went off and Consolidated bought it, and then they sold it, and Fleet bought it back. So it was one of those corporate back and forth, and a lot of that sort of business activity had to do with the Depression, because of course it was built right as the world was spiraling into a financial crisis.
Oh, you mean kind of like we are right now.
Yeah, the airplane was originally $3,500 in 1930. By 1931, they were trying to sell them off for $2,500.
Oh,
now, if you calculate that in today's dollars, it would have been, $70,000.
No kidding.
60, yeah.
Well, how about you go up that side and I'll go up this side and we'll have a look at the interior and you can tell me about that. I have never got to look inside one of these.
The instrumentation is pretty simple, Aaron. It's we have basically, this is an original airspeed. All these instruments have been redone by a company called Keystone in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, that works on strictly vintage instruments. So this is vintage, the altimeter is vintage, the clock is vintage, and this is a World War II era oil temp, oil pressure. The magneto switch, which basically runs the magnetos, and that's how aircraft engines operate electrically, is magnetos. And there's a left mag and a right mag, because every aircraft cylinder has 2 spark plugs, so that the right mag runs the left, the front, and the left mag runs the rear, so if there's ever a failure, you could still get home and still, be safe. The primer, basically fuel primer. This is the turn and bank I talked about, and the Venturi is mounted up there we looked at.
Yeah.
The only real modern addition to this would be the intercom, which is connected to the front cockpit, where I can chat with folks as they take them for rides. Of course, the GPS is just your positioning and a confirmation of height and speed. Those are original fuel and carb heat controls, and these are World War II throttle and mixture controls. And another modern concession, of course, would be the the handheld radio that actually works perfectly.
I was going to say, it looks like you got a cell phone in this thing. Didn't think they came with that in 1930. So then the passenger gets to sit up front.
Yeah, the passenger has even more basic instruments there, and there's a tachometer, which seems to be stuck at 9,000, but it does actually work. Your altimeter, airspeed, and a little bubble turn and bank. It's not connected to the Venturi, but it gives you an idea of whether your wings are stable, that sort of stuff.
So in an emergency, it looks like the passenger can help out with controls, or
all the controls, the engine controls, stick and rudder, and throttle are all duplicated in the front.
Wow.
Because this was a training airplane, so
right.
all the stick and all the controls are all genuine 1930, so it's duplicated like it was in the factory.
That's amazing. It's beautiful. I love it. So there you guys go. You got to see the oldest running airplane in Canada, and it is from the US, and it does feature rides. If anybody wants to go for a ride in this thing, contact us at ATP Customs Limited on Instagram. Hit us up on our website, atpcustoms.com, or leave a comment below. And Jeff was nice enough to invite us to go for a spin in this thing. And he actually has a GoPro mount where you can watch the back of the plane, watch the passengers in it, and watch forward. So I think we're going to go up for a ride in this plane pretty soon. If anybody wants to see that, just let us know, because this thing is awesome. We're so blessed and thankful to have been able to feature such an amazing ride. Thank you for watching, and I hope you subscribe. And by the way, he's about to flash it up and leave right now, so we'll keep filming.